Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre. Hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard
That's me.
Mathiasen. Each episode, we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond. Sometimes, even from the beyond. You can find us on our new YouTube channel, Terror in Tandem, or online at terrorintandem.com and on Instagram at Terror in Tandem. It's just say Terror in Tandem, Alexa Terror in Tandem, or something. Type it into Google, throw it into the wind.
We should test that before we tell people to do it.
Write it in blood in your
God.
circle.
Don't do any of that. But
and
do
summon
listen.
us. Yes, and we'll show up. When there's no, as they say, when there's no more room in hell, two dorks will start a podcast.
I don't know about you, but I have really been excited about this episode.
I have been as well, but it really makes me happy to hear you say that too.
I mean, I get really motion sick and seasick, but I am ready for Terror on the High Seas today.
Oh, yes. Excellent. Yar, matey.
We're not
As we
doing that.
do a hard pivot in this podcast, 70-something episodes in, to a pirate cast.
No, I'm really excited. Terror on the High Seas.
Goodness gracious.
No, it's Dawn of the Dead.
Make remake. Yes, we're talking the 1978 classic original, directed by George Romero, and the 2004 remake, directed by Zack Snyder, who is famous now, but this was his directorial debut.
And it also has a James Gunn.
Yes, exactly. Written
Working together.
Directed by former DCU architect and written by current DCU architect.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Before everyone went crazy and before the whole Martha controversy.
What's the whole Martha conspiracy?
Listen, I don't mean to be like... I'm excited that James Gunn has taken over DC. I like James Gunn. I like his attitude. I like the style of his movies. I think he's great. I was not a fan of the Zack Snyder era of DC because I don't think Superman should be scowling and snapping people's necks. That's just not
What's
Superman.
the Martha?
Well, there was a whole scene in Batman v Superman : Dawn of Justice : Ultimate Edition.
Martha Superman?
Where like Superman is choking Batman to death or something, and he says Martha, and that's like that's both their mom's name, and that stops him from killing him because he says Martha, and everyone watching it, including me, was like, "Fuck." It's just like, I like Henry Cavill, but he was not a good Superman. I don't know if that was his fault or Zack Snyder's.
He was great in Mission Impossible.
He was great in The Witcher. He's really good, but it was just so dark, and that's not really Superman.
But we're not here to talk about Superman.
No! How did that happen? Anyway, Dawn of the Dead. Now, this was an exciting project because you, beloved co-host, had never seen either version. I
feel more familiar with the 2004 version. Like, I feel like I have come across it or something, but no, I never watched either.
And it was a real pleasure to watch that, especially the original together.
I've put this out there a lot. I am not the biggest zombie movie person.
No, you have experienced zombie fatigue.
And also, I'm not the biggest zombie movie person.
Really? Even in the at the beginning of the zombie craze?
I mean, isn't this the beginning?
I would say
have laid the groundwork with these movies?
The 2004 remake, I would say, between that and Shaun of the Dead,
I like my
coming
zombies,
out the same year, really, really kickstarted the modern.
I like my zombies in thriller videos. Not really.
I'm not like other guys.
I don't like mass amounts of zombies at a time.
Interesting, because that is usually the point of zombies, is like 1-on-1, 1-on-2, 1-on-3 even. It's not so bad, but one on an endless, unending, ceaseless horde.
I don't know
that's
really
where
what
the
I
horror
would
comes
do.
from.
It's sort of the heaviness, the full body weight of the slow zombie seems suffocating to me and overwhelming, but the fast movements of the hordes of zombies that kind of never stop coming is also, but I feel like there's a little bit more maneuvering you can do with the fast zombies because you can like, you know, sort of get out of their way. But the slow moving zombie, once they put the full body weight on you.
I'd say I agree. It narratively kind of depends on what vibe and what are you trying to say with your zombie. So, you know, obviously in the original 1978 version, you've got the classic Romero slow moving zombie, and Romero uses those hordes as a metaphor, you know, largely for the slow grinding crush and dehumanization of late stage capitalism and consumerism. He got the idea quite famously when his friend, who was the manager of the mall, invited him into the hidden areas of the mall to observe unseen, observe the shoppers during Christmas season. And watching them sort of plod along is what gave Romero the idea of setting this, you know, a spiritual sequel to Night of the Living Dead in a shopping mall. Also,
well, I mean, that's a really good point to bring up, because when you look at men that go shopping with women,
yes,
they're usually very zombie-like.
Oh, checked out completely. Yeah. I mean, from personal experience, I just go right up in my head into a weird, happy, safe place and stay there until I can sense a question is being asked of me.
That's why they put those massager chairs and all those centralized couches and seating areas in malls.
Yeah, it's just deposit your dumpy husband zone, and that's fine. You know, I've been in that zone, and occasionally you lock eyes with somebody, and you're just like, yep.
I know there are plenty of men that like to go shopping, and women don't.
Oh, no, we're playing pretty hard into the stereotype, but it does apply sometimes.
Yeah. I think especially in a mall you see it, or in like a big... like a Macy's or something like that.
A shopping center.
Bag and, you know.
This probably applies more to our older listeners because I don't know if people even shop that way anymore necessarily.
Well, malls are a dying breed.
Yeah. But getting back to the metaphor aspect, I mean, the fast zombie definitely plays more into the idea of rage and aggression and, you know, uncontrolled violence and things like that, chaos. Whereas the slow plodding zombie is more of an existential dread. It's the inevitability. It's what's worse, being attacked quickly and getting killed off, or, you know, living for years and then dying anyway, horribly, because it's going to get you. It will get you.
I guess it depends on also what type of zombie plague is out there. Is it a virus? Is it a bite?
Well, what scares you more, being chased and you know, by snarling rabid monsters, or just the slow dehumanizing degradation of your life and your soul as you're forced to compromise and do horrible things to survive? I guess we know which one
scares you.
You know which one I like, baby.
The one that you put all that detail
on. Fuck yeah. Give me the fucking the metaphor for like just slowly chipping away at your soul with slow moving hordes of zombies. That is my jam. I am not the World War Z type. I like the shuffling undead, because also they move like they're dead. I'm
gonna put it out there. I'm not neither. I won't survive.
Well, it's not about survival. I mean, I'm dead in minutes in any apocalypse. I think fragile.
It is. I mean, I think these movies are about survival. But what
are
you surviving
but I don't
for?
watch them. I don't watch them like thinking, what would I do? Because
a lot of people do, though.
I'm thinking I'm dead almost right away. Or like, why would I even want to be around? Everyone smells. It's awful.
Yeah, right. What are you surviving for? I think is a really good question to ask.
That was definitely my question in, I think it was season 87 of The Walking Dead, when I'm just like, so anything like...
There's a new spinoff with Michonne and Rick.
There are a bunch of movies. There's a spinoff with... I mean, it's the Deadiverse. It's a lot.
So let's go back to the original Dawn of the Dead, 1978.
You want to start talking about that one?
Yeah, directed and created and written by George Romero, starring David M.G. Is that how you
Yeah,
say?
yeah.
You like say all of the letters in his name.
I
That's
know.
how it's pronounced.
Pretty much.
MG. Ken
Foree.
Galen Ross, which notably, she only acted in this. This was her debut film and 2 other films in her entire career. And then she went on to produce and direct.
She's since become a very successful and director. Actually, of the cast, the cast, most of them quit acting except for Ken Foree, who is still going.
Yeah.
He's been in tons of shit.
Scott H. Reininger.
Yeah.
And Tom Savini.
Oh, yes.
Who, we'll talk about him a lot.
Oh, yes.
He also did all the SFX of the movie.
The legendary effects of the original. I mean,
do you want to talk a little bit about why his, like, how he
absolutely.
came to
Let's talk about the and we're really just going to be scratching the surface. There is just go on YouTube and Google Dawn of the Dead making of. There's a documentary, you can watch it for free. It's got interviews with the cast, and it's got interviews with George Romero when he was still alive. It's really, really good. So we're just going to be scratching the surface because the making of this film is incredible. Mm-hmm. Now, this is a follow-up to Night of the Living Dead, but it's all new like every George Romero zombie movie. Totally new cast of characters, new setting, new everything.
So I guess I'll give a little plot summary then.
Go for it.
Dawn of the Dead takes place not long after Night of the Living Dead, although it's never really explained how long.
You get the sense that it's been like a couple of months.
Yeah, and the story basically follows 4 survivors of a zombie apocalypse: Peter, Roger, Francine, and Stephen. And they take refuge in an empty shopping mall. And it's not zombie free, but it is quite secure. So they basically start a life of safety to hide out there. And they think that, they've got themselves pretty well locked down. They've got
untouchable,
a plan. And a lot of the film, in the middle, I would say the first start really lays out the apocalypse and how it's hit Earth,
and the beginning of it,
TV station
has that incredible scene of the cops raiding the apartment complex.
Well, there's the political and TV reporter aspect of the early stages, and then the police and the vigilantes go into tenement housing.
Let's just get into it. This movie, from top to bottom, is soaked in commentary, yet never at the expense of the narrative.
Yeah,
it is
so it's
almost impossible task.
It's commentary on the social expectations of the middle class, like home, buying things, consumerism, and
absolutely.
Marriage.
Yeah,
there's a commentary on the socioeconomics and social class systems.
There is a definite criticism of the way government and experts communicate with the community, the way that information is dissembled, the way that information is spun, and you can sense that, like, even when the scientists are on TV desperately begging people to follow their instructions, they still don't know how to talk to people.
Right.
This information is not going; it's not penetrating, and when the cops raid that building, it really brings to mind the famous, the massacre in Philadelphia that happened only a few years prior when the Philadelphia police bombed the apartment complex.
Yeah.
It's soaked in racial tensions, class tensions. As society falls apart, you really... it's all laid bare.
I think
all
it's
the cards
also
on the
interesting.
Table.
I mean, this all happens within the first 20 minutes of the film. I think it's really interesting to see how certain people that go into law enforcement do so that they can enact violence on others,
use it as a cover.
Some that need to enact violence on others, it destroys them.
Yeah.
As we see with that suicide of the one cop after he has to kill somebody in
the whole raid on the apartment complex is incredible. It's an incredible set piece.
For sure.
It's got some of the best effects of the movie, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But then what I really like about it is right away it establishes the 4 characters. They're not good. They're not bad, but they're not good.
Well, you can tell that from when the one cop asks them if they have a cigarette.
Well, and also Ken Foree very
Nope.
deliberately says, like,
And
no,
then they're
we're
all smoking in the
thieves. He's like, we are
helicopter.
fugitives and thieves.
Yeah.
And they admit right away, like, they're stealing a helicopter.
Well, you
they're-
have to be.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
in a lawless society.
It sets the
what laws are you going to break?
That's the incredible thing about the beginning of this movie is before they get to the mall, all of the rules have been established. Not just the rules of the lore of the zombies, which, to Romero's great credit, he does not at all go into where these fucking things came from or how it started. But he does go over the rules, like bites will turn you, destroy the brain. But also the rules of these characters are established. This sort of characteristics, there's great characterization, really, really shown instead of told through their journey to the mall. You get the sense, you get the measure of each of these 4 people.
The characters have depth.
Yes.
And you really get to see like a building of world of these characters and then how they've responded to the new way.
And this is a big contrast to the remake, is in keeping his core cast to 4 people, you really get time to know and identify and learn about these people. Whereas the remake had a lot of like red shirts in it. You know what I mean? Like just fodder, just like people who were there to get eaten.
Yeah, but we'll get to that. I do want to say that, speaking of characters with depth, Francine is a really great example because she doesn't play the stereotypical role of a damsel in distress or like a woman that screams her head off. She takes the lead and sticks, basically closely to, those strong female characters.
I mean, she calls out the male bullshit immediately. She's like, I need to be included in conversations.
Yeah.
I need to be a decision maker. I have every fucking right to survive.
So I said that, she's not like a screaming victim in this.
I don't even know if she ever really screams.
She doesn't. So the actress Galen Ross purposefully did not scream in the movie and refused to, and told George Romero that she believes that her character is strong and needed to maintain that strength. And if she screamed, then that strength would be lost.
I'm thinking...
She refused.
I have never really made that observation, but you're right. She never screams in that movie, and that really fits with her body of work as a director. She specializes in telling stories empowering, female creators and female, not just creators, but like activists and things like that. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
And also good on Romero for being receptive
Absolutely.
to that.
He really unfolds this film methodically. Because it follows these 4 survivors, they have to band together, even though they're really very different.
Yes. They're very different.
And basically
and they
have
like
a common
each other.
enemy. They develop a common enemy and they band together, and there isn't cooperation within the larger society, but they are able to have this micro cooperative society.
Another commentary inside the movie on, you can make decisions with small groups, but the more you expand and the bigger you become, the more corruption and breakdown there is in bureaucracy.
Well, it's, I think that Romero is showing how stark survivalism is, and it's basically like tribes.
It's also
tribalism is what's coming.
One thing about this movie as well is I would argue it's almost perfectly paced. It starts fast, it slows down purposefully because the message it's telling in the middle of the movie requires the movie to take a pause. And you start to really feel like, oh, this is just a prison with nicer bars.
Yeah, so they try to live a regular life.
Yeah.
These survivors
Cutting
that we are really
the outside
getting
world
close with.
Yeah.
And they quickly realize that it's not much of a life. It's not everything that you're told that you're supposed to have, which is things and a home and a family and a marriage and a baby on the way, isn't going to cut it here.
Tennyson understood humanity when he said to strive, to seek, and not to yield. The thing about people, and that's what modern consumerism and late-stage capitalism gets wrong, is we are not designed to be fully contented. No. We are hardwired. It's a survival instinct to want more, to do more, to strive, to seek, and not to yield.
Well, it's
and
interesting.
If you give us everything, it's kind of like WALL-E, where they all turn into blobs and everything is done for them. It's like reading about the rise of AI and all that. It's like, oh, cool. Just put the gun in your mouth, humanity,
I mean, it's really, I think when you see the scene of her, like in bed with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And he's sitting on the edge of the bed and they're just like listlessly staring into nowhere.
If not for the end of the world, it could be any unhappy boomer
It could
marriage.
Be anywhere. You don't know what's happening outside the doors. You don't know what's happening inside the doors.
Yeah.
And then she has him teach her how to fly the helicopter.
Yes.
As now I need to
And that reinvigorates the group.
Yeah,
that does.
They're forced to, because
the tragedy. The tragedy of the story is right about the time they realize that life has to be more than just existence. They also realize that you can't block the outside world out. No. You can build walls, but walls invite invaders. They invite people to tear them down.
Those invaders are a gang of bikers that come to the mall after seeing Francie learning to fly the helicopter on the roof. And they take an opportunity to loot the mall.
Yeah, they're basically like Mad Max style.
They just want destruction and
they fuck the place
looting.
up.
Yeah, they really do.
And memorable member of the gang, Blades,
Tom Savini,
whose character's name is Blades because he's got a machete. Mm-hmm. Tom Savini, and he does a karate kick.
Well, he does all the stunts.
Yeah,
he did all the makeup.
He's
and
pretty
do you
awesome.
Want to tell how he came about?
Let's talk about Tom Savini. So Tom Savini he's a legend. He is an absolute master of practical visual effects. He's been in the business for a long, long time, and he's so popular. He actually even guest starred on an episode of The Simpsons. I remember that because I had not watched The Simpsons for a long time, and then I watched it because Tom Savini was on it, and everyone else was like, who the fuck is that? And I'm like, it's Tom Savini! He also later on directed the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead with Tony Todd, which is actually really good. Mm-hmm. So Tom Savini was hired to do the effects for Night of the Living Dead, and then he was drafted into the Vietnam War, where he became a combat photographer for the Army, and in doing so, saw some horrific things. He used what he saw in the war to instruct and inspire his effects work, which is pretty dark.
Yeah.
But in interviews, Tom Savini has gone into that, and he has talked about his work as his coping mechanism. He has admitted that the things he saw and witnessed in Vietnam were horrific beyond imagining, and the way that he's been able to live with it is by doing this work. This is the way he's actually been outspoken about it, saying that he's avoided some of the pitfalls that befell some of his fellow veterans coming back from the war, who were unable to cope with the horrors. But once you know that, it does give a certain extra bite.
Yeah.
Because these are very gory effects.
Yeah.
And real,
not for the faint of
yeah.
effects.
So one of the most famous effects of the movie is it happens in the apartment raiding scene is the exploding head. I remember when I first saw the exploding head scene, I was like, whoa! I mean, this guy's head explodes.
Yeah.
Now, that was supposed to be for a very different part of the movie. That was supposed to be in basically the end of the movie. The original ending, now the ending of the movie, sorry to spoil the movie from 1978, but Ken Foree is about to kill himself. Then he decides, no, I don't want to. And he runs and he joins Galen Ross in
The helicopter.
in the helicopter. So, and they fly away, and it's not super optimistic because they don't know where they're going, and they're low on fuel.
It's the most optimistic of the two.
Yes. Now, the original ending, which George Romero decided against, was, he does kill himself, and Gail walks purposefully into the helicopter blades and kills herself. So the exploding head was supposed to be for her.
Yep.
And George Romero, I'm glad he decided not to go with that, because even though it's a quote-unquote happy ending, it's not. When they're on the helicopter...
It's an optimistic ending. It's not
kind
a
of
happy ending.
But you definitely get the sense of, like, they're still fucked.
She's
about to give birth.
They talked about not having enough gas,
yeah.
and having to stop for gas.
So what you really get left with is a sense of, okay, so you postponed your inevitable, horrible, gruesome deaths by maybe a little while. And in the meantime, between now and your inevitable, gruesome death, what horrible things are going to happen to you? So that's the kicker of the Romero zombie world is the death is slow. It's like almost like zombies as radiation poisoning, which no surprise that would be on his mind. It's of his generation, the atomic era. So before we get into some little facts about the incredible making of this movie, you want to take a little break?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
You finally decided to leave the office and make some time for that adventure you've always dreamed about. But what happens if you miss the boat for that guided tour down the Amazon? Or if the only guides through the haunted Aztec ruins are too expensive? Well, there's always a seat for you at Off-Brand Adventure Tours, where every adventure is an adventure of its own. And by that I mean your chances of survival are almost zero. At Off-Brand Adventure Tours, our untrained death magnets will guide you part of the way through dangerous locales before disappearing entirely or getting eaten in front of you. Then, you and your traumatized group of weekend warriors get to spend the rest of your time getting to know the digestive systems of the local fauna. Fun. No location is too taboo, too cursed by ancient gods, or too full of anacondas for off-brand adventure tours. Worried about money? We'll talk rates when you totally get back safe with all of your limbs and loved ones. You can't afford the best, or the rest, so let's just skip the bullshit and get on the boat already. Come find out if there really are snakes out here this big at Off-Brand Adventure Tours, where you absolutely get what you pay for. This is a fake ad for a fake service on a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse utilizing the services of a sketchy riverboat guide with a culturally insensitive accent. Ooh, wonderful.
I do just want to say that, I think you were going to mention about how well cast.
Yes, by these people that weren't really, like, they were
haven't
actors,
done much
but
since.
No, a lot of them
acting.
kind of retired. Yeah. And it's a shame because they were fucking good.
And David M.G., who is a famed British actor and comedian.
Yeah, he was a stage actor before
yeah,
he became...
not comedian. But,
yeah.
I mean, I say comedian, but this movie is funny. It's supposed to be a little, satirical.
Absolutely. There is a bit of black humor in this because so much of this is uncomfortably pointing the camera at the audience and being like, look at you fucking slobs.
Yeah.
This is you on Black Friday, basically.
But David M.G.'s been compared very notoriously to Hugh Laurie.
Wow.
And his resemblance.
Oh,
which I pointed out in the film, but this is like a thing.
I mean, they look incredibly alike,
Not
and they
anymore,
also kind of sound... Back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he
very
really,
much so.
like, back in Hugh Laurie's, like, Blackadder days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the actors, they had to do a really good job with a lot of what they had to deal with, but not a lot of constant action. And when David M.G.'s character turned into a zombie, George Romero is like, that was incredible. He deserves an award for it. It was the best zombie walk.
It really was.
Ever.
It stands out because the thing is before he's turned, he's injured very specifically in his leg and his arm, and he incorporates those wounds into his zombie movement because Romero's zombies are animated lumps of flesh.
Yeah.
They shamble. They're clumsy. They don't really like. I mean, in later movies, they kind of evolve a little bit, but
there's a pretty significant conversation of why they're coming to the mall.
Why are so many people coming to the mall?
Because they have this desire that hasn't left them.
Yeah, like a residual.
Remember, they needed to go here.
But scientifically speaking, with Romero's zombies, what science fiction typically speaking, that's basically just like the lingering echoes of a synapse firing.
Yeah,
and it's just these people are shambling. But when Steven turns into a zombie, he remembers where the hidden wall is.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, so he
wants to eat her.
Yeah, they do retain some sense of memory. It's amazing. And thankfully, given our modern predilection in storytelling to like explain every single tiny thing, George Romero doesn't do that.
No,
he does not. He very purposefully focuses on the human elements, and stays away from the quote unquote lore of it, which you can get bogged down with pretty quickly.
Let's talk a little bit about the making of this. I have some information to share.
I would love to be shared with.
George Romero wrote the script in 3 weeks at Dario Argento's Roman villa.
Oh, God. Come on, Dario.
Argento collaborated and read all the versions of the script, and his final sort of take on Romero's was, I don't like that it's so funny. And so when he showed it to European outlets, he cut it to make it less funny.
Now, Dario Argento, obviously fans of this pod will know that name. And we know there are billions of you. He was the saving grace of this movie because Romero was unable to secure financing in America. He could not, no one would pay him for this. And Dario Argento was a huge fan of Night of the Living Dead. He heard that Romero was trying to work on a sequel.
He said, come to my villa.
He did. He quite literally inserted himself saying,
he did,
like,
and he said, guess who's going to do the music?
Yep, Goblin. He got him financing in the form, I think, about $1.4 million.
He got him a place to write his script.
A fucking villa in Rome. He got him distribution. Now, the deal is Argento would get international distribution rights. And as a result of that, a couple of things happened that are actually pretty funny. So the Italians being the Italians, they marketed the fuck out of this movie and really, really had a lot to do with its international acclaim and success. They made several different cuts for different European markets that they knew would play to the different sensibilities of those cultures. Now, an American is not going to understand that. They're going to make one cut for Europe and go here. Mm-hmm. The Italians, they made different cuts for different parts of the world, and it became a smash success everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, there is a director's cut that you and I watched together. Romero insisted that the U.S. theatrical cut was the definitive version, which actually was unrated because it was going to get slapped with an X rating. Yeah. And I agree. The director's cut adds nothing of substance. It kind of slows the pacing down a little, and it adds some moments that didn't need to be there. So Argento gets him Goblin, he gets him financing, then he does this international distribution, and then because the movie in Italy was released as Zombie, that was the title.
Yeah.
In Italy, Italian copyright law, stick with me, you can make a sequel to anything. It doesn't have to be connected. You can go and make Beauty and the Beast Part 2, and it can be fucking nothing to do with anything Beauty and the Beast. You could just call it that. So that's kind of what they did. Lucio Fulci made a movie, and they titled it Zombie 2 because they wanted to capitalize on the success of Zombie, a.k.a. Dawn of the Dead, even though Fulci's Zombie, which has since been re-released as just Zombie, has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do. And he was quite pissed off about that, actually. There's even a Zombie 3 that Fulci was signed on to direct and then couldn't because he got sick. So, yeah, they've wrung every lira and euro they could out of this. But as a result, we have this movie. it wouldn't exist without this kind of incredible exploitation of it, which is amazing.
I do also want to say that they're in the film with Ken Foree's character. They stop to get gas, and 2 child zombies come running out at him.
Yeah.
That he had no idea that was going to happen.
Yeah.
The actor
Yeah.
had no idea that was going to happen. And those 2 child zombies were played by Tom Savini's niece and nephew, and they're the only Romero zombies to run.
Yeah.
And not do a zombie shuffle.
They do. They are quick. Yeah. They jump right on him.
Yep.
Little kids. And that is it's a defining moment.
It is.
Because you've seen that character kill before, but this one takes something out of him.
Yeah.
And it changes him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, imagine being like, hey, kids, want to...
Yeah, you want to come to Uncle's work?
Get shot?
They probably loved it.
Oh, my God. It would have been amazing. Play with all, like, weird makeup and fucking effects work and get squibs. That's awesome.
Well said. Do you want to go to the remake?
Why not?
So, Dawn of the Dead, 2004, directed by Zack Snyder, written by George Romero and James Gunn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was source material.
Yeah, source material.
That's the credit on
I know.
IMDb.
I know. But
starring,
it's not like George Romero sat down with
No.
James Gunn to fucking write this.
Starring Sarah Polley.
Yeah.
She was primarily in indie films and has been. She recently got, helmed the award-winning writer, director of Women Talking.
Yeah, Sarah Polley has long been an indie darling. This is one of the reasons...
She was in Go from 1999.
Oh, yeah. No.
That is such a great movie.
Folks of a certain age definitely have seen that movie a million times. Doug Liman's directorial. No, it wasn't his debut, but it was directed by Doug Liman.
Also starring Ving Rhames.
Ty
do
Burrell.
I need to say more? Mekhi Phifer, Jake Weber, who's a character actor, and I know you've seen him in a million things.
Yeah.
And Michael Kelly, who I love, Jack Ryan, House of Cards, and Ty Burrell, from Modern Family.
Yeah, honestly,
he is not the character from Modern Family in this film.
But this is the kind of character that Ty Burrell primarily used to play before Modern Family.
Yeah, he sort of had the Justin Trudeau attitude.
He always played
like
a
young
douchebag kind of guy, and
Uh-huh.
then Modern Family cast him as a goofball, and that sort of changed his public image.
Yeah, he does good either way.
Oh, he's beautifully cast in this movie. So, Dawn of the Dead 2004 is a movie.
Can I give a plot summary?
Do it.
So Anna, played by Sarah Polley, goes home after a long shift at a hospital where she's a nurse, and she is then woken to this whole new world when a neighborhood child comes in to her home and attacks her and her husband, and then her husband is dead and wakes up and attacks her, and she escapes.
It's a great beginning.
Yeah, she escapes, and she meets a police officer named Kenneth along with other survivors, and they go to Crossroads Shopping Mall, where supplies are running low and other trapped survivors need help. And the group comes to realize they can't stay put forever and decide to escape the mall.
Now, this is an extremely different movie from the original.
So it starts very differently.
It's
going to hone in on this caregiver who doesn't have any idea what's going on. Walks
and
by
shit
people
happens
coming into the hospital being
very
like,
quickly.
oh, there's a bar fight. Yes, it starts to unfold very quickly, but she does go to bed that night.
Mm-hmm.
A completely different person than what happens within minutes of waking up.
Oh, yeah. She's murdering her husband who's trying to murder her.
Yeah.
It is. So this is a movie that when it was announced, it was, hey, we're remaking one of the greatest movies ever made. We are going to have this guy no one's ever heard of direct it because he's never directed a movie before. And we're going to have the writer of Scooby-Doo do the screenplay.
Yeah.
And I went, fuck all of this.
Well, Ving Rhames went,
well,
I want to be in this
then film. They started casting. And you've got Ving Rhames playing a cop. Okay. This is, after Mission Impossible, but before Mission Impossible was like a crazy franchise like it is now. You've got Sarah Polley in an action horror blockbuster.
She was like, what?
Indie darling, Sarah Polley. Yeah. And just, it was so well cast. It intrigued me. And Mekhi Phifer had never been in a horror movie to my knowledge. So that really got me interested.
Also, the whole tone of the film is completely different.
It is completely different.
It is much scarier, much darker, and much more aggressive.
I only agree with one of those words. I would say it's much more aggressive. I would contend it is a different kind of scary, and it's really, what do you prefer? Dawn of the Dead, the remake, is...
You have that sort of like... oh, shit, what is it?
So, there, in talking about different types of fear, Dawn of the Dead, the original, showcases dread.
Yeah, dread, right.
It's the slow, crushing weight of knowing nothing matters and you are doomed.
I guess it depends on what scares you more.
Having just enough room to thrash about wildly until your inevitable end. It's why I like H.P. Lovecraft. It's why I like cosmic horror. It's why I like slow burns. The 2004 remake is very much fright. It's things snarling, jumping out at you. It's relentless. It's violent. It's aggressive. It's in your face. You can't escape it.
And the zombies are that way, too.
Yes. And that is, to me, extremely frightening. Don't get me wrong. The 2004 movie is a legit scary horror movie. But, for my money, that kind of fear fades. You jump, and then you have a little laugh because you realize you're okay. And then you go on with your day. Oh, wasn't that fun? Dawn of the Dead, the original, gets under your skin. And it stays with you forever. It changes you. It lives with you. It's just a different experience. I prefer that experience, which is why I like the movies I like. But don't in any way mistake me. The 2004 remake is a legitimate horror movie.
Yeah, so I do think that it was much scarier, much darker, and more aggressive. And the main cast being larger, I think makes it seem even more plausible because these haphazard group of survivors in this mall really are in various stages of surviving.
Oh, and they're a terrible group of people.
They do not cooperate.
Yes.
They make terrible decisions, bad decision after decision. And there is a lot of individual decisions within the group that are made to the detriment of the whole. Again, which is a great commentary on what I think it would really be like when you're stuck with a bunch of random strangers trying to survive. You're really going to be out for number one.
Yes.
You're not going to think about the rest of the group, which back in 1978, maybe that was a little bit more of an idealized version of survival.
These stories are telling, they're two very different stories.
Yeah.
The first movie was very focused on causes that were near and dear to Romero. And, we're talking the late 70s, so economic crisis, energy crisis, crisis in the Middle East. Does any of this sound fucking familiar? There was a grinding sense of pessimism at the time. 2000s was a time of extreme, and more and fast, and energy drinks were starting to become a big thing, and everything was amped up coming out of the 90s. So the idea was, hyper aggression and to show how fucking quickly things fall apart. That the idea of society in Romero's world, it holds on for a while. In Snyder's version, it lasts about 6 minutes. Things fall apart basically overnight. And the aggressive mistrust and uncooperation is a definite commentary on modern American society and politics and the way we talk to each other in the discourse. This was unfortunately just as true in 2004 as it is in nearly 2024. We are not kind to each other. we don't get along,
especially
and we don't work together.
When you don't understand what's happening and you don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, the zombie origins in this film aren't explained either.
No.
And
we do get some lovely cameos.
We do. You want to talk about the cameos?
I mean,
so,
we got Ken Foree,
Scott Reiniger,
they both cameo,
and Tom Savini.
Yes.
All cameo.
Yes.
They all appeared in 1978.
All in great roles, too. Especially Ken Foree plays like a televangelist, preacher, doomsday preacher.
Yeah. He delivers the line, "When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth."
Which is his classic line from the original and was the tagline of the movie and is one of the greatest fucking lines ever.
And Tom Savini plays a sheriff.
Yeah.
Being interviewed on TV, and he's basically like, yeah, we got to get them all.
It's amazing.
When they're stocking up on ammunition in the gun store in the mall. Yeah, you heard that right. The music from the gun store is the original film that can be heard playing very lightly in the background. Yeah,
so the score of this movie is extremely different because
it is. It's a lot of different music. They had the Richard Cheese version of Down with the Sickness.
Yeah. Come on, get down with the sickness.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. The composer very deliberately, I think, moved away from Goblin.
Yeah.
Goblin, in my mind, it really did fit the tone of the original, especially that sort of slapstick circus music that's playing as the zombies are going around the mall.
Own element of fear.
Yeah,
Goblin's music is its own element of fear, and I think
it would not have fit this movie at all.
They used different colors of blood for zombies in different stages of decomposition in this film. So red for the recently dead, a browner version for the ones that have been dead a few weeks, and blacker, oily version for the ones that have been dead for a considerable period of time, which I thought was an interesting technique.
No, the effects in this movie, there is some CGI, but there's a lot of good practical effects too. Tyler Bates was the composer of the film. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention his name when I said that, but he did very deliberately move away from Goblin because I'm picturing Zack Snyder's movie with a Goblin soundtrack, and it's like really tonally a mess.
There's also a pregnant woman in this film.
Yeah. You want to see a zombie give birth to another zombie? Then I've got a movie for you.
It's very bleak and very dark.
See, here's the thing. George Romero was pretty famously unhappy with this movie because he said it's a great action film, but it's not a horror movie. When I was 24 years old, this movie came out, and I saw it in the theater, and I loved the shit out of it because, number one, my expectations were negative, whatever. And number two, it's pretty awesome. Having watched it again, though, right after watching the original again, my attitude has definitely changed.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Zack Snyder said that the reason his zombies run at full speed is because he wanted to avoid the comic impression given by the slow shuffling zombie. And it's the same technique in 28 Days Later.
Absolutely. And it is scary, and it does work. They are like rabid monsters, which really fits the tone and the message of the movie, which is very James Gunn. I mean, James Gunn is quite outspoken in his views in pointing the camera at American society and our hyper-aggressive nature.
And the end of this film is... So the end of the first film has at least a unknown, possibly hopeful, you can take it either way.
You can.
End of the film.
Yeah. I think it's heavily implied they're fucked.
You do not take it any other way than...
They're done.
They're done. Yeah. It's terrible. It was a terrible decision, just like all their other decisions. And that's the thing. They make bad decision after bad decision in this film.
Which is very realistic. As opposed to the first
film, which they made a lot of great decisions.
They thoughtfully planned things out.
Very logical. Even as they were traveling to the mall, they did it in a very methodical way.
Yeah.
As opposed to this, is they like sort of like just ran for survival in the mall.
There's a much more frantic pace to the remake. It's a lot shorter of a film in running time because it's a very different kind of movie. It's a blockbuster. It's an action horror movie. It's not straight horror. It's a lot of running, gunning. I mean, they make a fortified buzz at the end with like spikes and buzzsaws and shit.
Though.
Sure, but it's much more of like a comic book movie
It is.
than the original.
Both films share bleak outlooks on human nature and civilization.
Which is pretty... I mean, Zombie is a good tool to tell that story.
Both films show an age where consumption and division rule.
I mean, that's been the age for the last 150 years.
Both films show how we turn on one another even as something sinister rises from within. And the mall remains a microcosm of society in both films, but a society in decline.
So where would you set it now? I mean, think about it. If we have the idea of taking, you know, a social cultural center of a town or a city and turning that into a place you fortify for the apocalypse, what's the modern equivalent now that shopping malls are, you know, shuffling their way into zombiehood?
Like a stadium?
That's what I was thinking too. A sports stadium. Those are like super modern.
Like a sports arena?
Yeah.
Of some kind?
But they're so big and open.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's interesting to see.
Or
like
a skyscraper.
Are we ready now that it's been 20
Do you know
years?
what I mean?
Are we ready for a new
modern skyscraper?
Yeah. Like or
Where
you know,
want to get up high.
a technology campus like Google or some shit.
But you want to get up high.
They've got beanbag chairs.
You know, I mean, how many
ping pong?
How many zombies are gonna like? It's gonna take a while to get up the stairs.
Well, that's a whole new other episode. We could do our zombie survival kit along with our summer camp survival kit, a now classic episode.
So we already know your preference is the 1978 version. You've been teasing it out the whole time, and I will say
but
that
the 2004 version is so good. It is, and I think you should watch it.
I am going to cheat a little bit here
Ruh-roh.
and say that I think both have value.
Oh, that's fair.
And should both be consumed.
Yeah.
And the consumer should decide which they prefer, because I don't have a preference, but the one that I would probably rewatch is the 2004 version.
Interesting.
I would just say I would rewatch it because, like what you said, is the existential dread and the slow pace of the original that sticks with you isn't as fun to re-engage in as the 2004, which is like action and like, you know, people being assholes and like sometimes their end is justified and satisfying, and then
it's certainly down to
like
personal
super
preference.
bleak and terrible.
Yeah.
So it's like more entertaining. The 2004 is more entertaining because it doesn't leave you with like a sense of like, you know, lack of optimism in the human race as much as the first one does.
It's also Zack Snyder's only good movie. He, in my opinion, he really came on the scene showing a lot of talent, and then just couldn't stop using slow motion.
I know that your preference is the first one, as I mentioned, and I said mine is either, but watch both. But if I had to rewatch again, it'd be 2004. But what do you want to say about?
I mean,
both?
I'm just excited that you have now seen both of these. I think what makes the 2004 version so successful, aside from the fact that it's, you know, it's a well-made movie, it's entertaining, is that it doesn't try to redo the original. They very purposefully from the outset said, we're approaching this like The Thing or The Fly, which in my opinion is an absolutely essential component to a successful remake. Is you must bring something new to the table. You have to spin it differently. You have to tell it's something new. I you know, very famously when Gus Van Sant reshot Psycho shot for shot, except for adding a scene where we get to see Norman Bates masturbating. That was his one contribution to the Psycho fucking mythos. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to see that. Why would I want to see that? Why would I want to see Anne Heche and Vince Vaughn just doing the same exact thing that Janet Leigh and fucking
Norman Bates?
Oh God. Anthony Perkins. Goodness gracious, brain fart. But I think that is what makes it successful. Also, the casting, like I said, really unexpected. And James Gunn is a talented writer. I know now that he's big and famous and he has his critics and his detractors, but I always enjoy James Gunn.
Yeah, me too.
His name's on it. I know it's going to be a good time. I know it's probably going to make me cry at some point. Like, he's gotten really good at that.
I mean, it's hard to make a zombie movie be so deep as the original.
If you want to have fun, the remake.
Yeah.
If you want something that is, in my opinion, at least, a bit more cerebral, thought-provoking, and leaves you with a sense of, like, the original. Yeah. Absolutely. They both deserve their time in the sun. They both deserve mention. They both deserve the accolades they've gotten. For my money, the original is a classic, whereas the remake is a good movie. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't sit in my pantheon of, like,
and I think you should
evers.
watch both, but I would return to the 2004.
Well, that's Remake, Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead, 1978 and 2004.
Join us next episode when we will be broadcasting from the middle of the Atlantic.
We will.
On a schooner. Yar.
On a catamaran.
On a catamaran in the middle of the ocean for another episode of Pirates of the High Seas.
Yeah. Arr.
Bye, everybody. Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Sispanik. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're standing right behind you.